Today is November 10th, United States Marine Corps birthday. I am here in Waterford, Connecticut at the Veterans of Korea and Vietnam and Saudi Wars Memorial. I'd like to talk about Corporal Kemaphun An Chanawong. He was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps. He was the first U.S. troop from Connecticut to be killed in the Iraq War on March 23rd, 2003, 3 days into the war. He was assigned to an amphibious track unit in Nasiriyah, and as he was running ammo across a bridge, an enemy Iraqi soldier sniper shot him and killed him instantly. A few days later, I read about it in the newspaper, and I had not known that my former friend An had even joined the Marine Corps until I heard about his death. Fortunately, I was working at Mohegan Sun Casino, and his mother was one of my coworkers, so I was able to extend my condolences to her and his family in person. Me and An were friends back in the day in Waterford because we used to hang out because they used to pick me up because I was the only one who could get away with buying beer at the age of 18. So, we used to party and all that. So that's why we became friends. So today on this podcast, I'd like to talk about war stories from fellow co-workers and friends that have told me their story. Since it's Marine Corps' birthday, I'm trying to stick to the war stories that my friends told me. I personally did not serve in combat. As some of y'all already know, I did deploy. I probably end up telling you guys some of my stories because we were doing a lot of dangerous stuff. So the first story I'd like to tell you about is a Marine named Sam. He was a recon Marine. So for any of y'all that don't know, reconnaissance, Marine Corps reconnaissance, like every United States Marine is basically a special forces trained combatant. We all get at least some level of special forces training, including hand-to-hand and special weapons. But Marine recon teams are the elite the elite force in the Marine Corps. And during Vietnam, you would have 4 to 5 man teams, all the way up to like maybe a 30-man team on a recon team. And reconnaissance, their main job was to sneak around in the bush, find out where the enemy soldiers are without themselves being detected, and relay that intelligence back to the battalions so that the battalions had advanced knowledge of where the enemy was located at, so they could plan their operations. So as you could say, as you might assume, the standards to qualify to become a reconnaissance operator are higher than the typical standards in the Marines or in the Army or whatever branch of service you are in. So, because you're elite, you got to be a commando. You have to be able to live in the bush or in the woods, for weeks at a time without being detected. You cannot there's very little room for error. All of your weapons and your equipment have to be properly maintained, and you have to keep them in working order. So I'm gonna tell you about 2 Marine recon veterans who told me their stories. Both of them were coworkers when I worked at Mohegan Sun Casino, and both of them served in Vietnam and Marine Corps reconnaissance. So the first one is Sam. He was older, 60-something-year-old, or close to being 70 years old, when he told me his story about, I think it was like 12 or 15 years ago. He told me his story. And I'm going to tell you the backstory why he told me his story. So Sam was worked in security. He was just a normal security guard. For any of y'all that don't know, in the casino, the security personnel, they don't get paid very much. They're kind of like a mall cop. They just carry a radio, and when something's going down, and they call their boss, or they call the tribal police or the state police, and then they let them handle it. So that's all security does. They're just physical monitors for whatever's going on. So I remember one shift I was working, Sam came down. Sam had to do like a couple hours being a security guard post outside one of the nightclubs. And I was working on the casino floor below it. So I remember I came off break one time, and Sam came downstairs, and he was all pissed off. He's like, Mike, these freaking punks, they don't know me. I was like, Sam, I never seen you this upset. What's going on? He said, they call me racist, because Sam was an older white gentleman. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, Mike, if these kids knew what I did in Vietnam and what I went through, they would never even think to call me racist. What happened was, there was like this group of like 18 to 20 year olds, right? Like 4 or 5 kids. I think they were like Puerto Rican, or like they were mixed between Puerto Rican and black kids. And they was trying to get in the club, and Sam was doing his job. He said, I can't let you in until I see your ID. And they're like, you don't need to see our ID. We're old enough. Just let us in, old man. And he's like, no, I can't. That's not, I'm not allowed to do that. And they said, you're just doing it because we're black. You're racist. And then they stormed off. He got hot. He just had to vent. So he told me his story. And he said, Mike, on my recon team, I had a 5-man team. And we had a couple black guys. You know what I'm saying? And we had each other's back, man. There's things that we did to save each other's lives that I don't even like talking about. But he said, I'm going to tell you one story. I was like, really? Was it really that bad? He's like, I'm going to tell you one story. He said, one night they was tracking an enemy North Vietnamese NVA Army battalion, like a whole fucking battalion, right? And it was just the 5 of them. And he said they were heavily camouflaged in the bush on the side of the trail so that nobody could see them. As the NVA battalion, a whole freaking battalion, so you're talking like at least like maybe like a couple hundred guys, was walking through that trail while they was like off to the side, camouflage hidden in the bushes at a low profile. He said one of the NVA soldiers during that march stopped to take a piss and fucking started pissing right on him while he was laying on the ground in the bushes camouflaged. Finished his piss, got back in formation, and then they left. Sam had to stay completely quiet. So, I wanted to know more details because I did believe him, but of course I believed him, but how you ask somebody a couple follow-up questions to see if they're really telling you the truth. I was like, so I said, Sam, are you sure that this enemy soldier didn't know you were there? And he said, I don't think he knew I was there, but I'm not sure. Because what would have happened is that enemy soldier, if he had known that he was there, maybe he thought he was alone. And maybe the enemy soldier's like, you know what? This dude's going to die anyway. You know what I'm saying? He ain't going to do nothing. He ain't going to shoot us because we got a whole fucking battalion here. I'll just let him go. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm kind of tired of combat. I'm tired of killing people right now. So I'm just going to piss on him, let him know that I hate him. You know what I'm saying? And just keep him moving. You know what I'm saying? We'll fight another day. You know what I'm saying? It's not heroic for me to shoot somebody who's like, has no chance of fucking survival. So I'm just going to piss on him and leave. And Sam said, I don't know. He's like, I don't think he knew I was there because I was heavily camouflaged, but you never know. And, it got me thinking during that conversation. I'm like, well, wait a second. you guys were like over there for like a year doing that stuff, month in, month out. I was like, and he's like, I said, you probably didn't sleep much. And he's like, nah, we never. He's like, when I was on combat operations at like 30 days at a time or whatever, I never slept. And I asked him, I said, come on, Sam, that's impossible. How is that possible that y'all never slept when y'all was in the field? And you know what he told me? He's like, yo, Mike, you know how many freaking drugs they had over there? We was doing everything, cocaine, fucking everything. He said that's how we stayed awake. And that's when I was like, all right, it's a fucking wrap. I believe you. But that was Sam, you know. And so the next guy I want to talk about, it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure his name is Rich. Now, he is a disabled veteran like myself, but he was a Marine recon in Vietnam. And his team was different than Sam's team because he served in the Delta. So his team would average he told me, between 25 and 30 guys a week. And now the reason why he said a week is because he said usually by the end of each week, we was getting at least one or two casualties. Because our job in the Delta, because he served in the Delta. Some Marines served in like Khe Sanh, some served in Da Nang and all that stuff. And some, like, you know, because the different branches of military, they all had their different locations in Vietnam where they had to police and do operations. His battalion or whatever battalion he was in, or regiment, they covered the Delta in southern Vietnam. So his recon team was kind of more like an infantry style team because they would do reconnaissance. But a lot of times they would get action and they would get into firefights with the enemy soldiers surrounding the Delta. So it was almost kind of like they was recon and they was doing intelligence, but it was more like they was just like straight up infantry policing the Delta. So he told me I was wounded at least once. He said there was one firefight when the one time he got shot there was a firefight. And then he had grabbed, I'm trying to remember what weapon he grabbed. I know it wasn't an M16 that he was using during that firefight. I'm pretty sure it was an M60. But I know that it was a fully auto, it was, M16s back then were fully auto anyway. But I'm pretty sure that he was on a crew serve weapon. A crew serve weapon means that it's a larger weapon, just, you know, a typical automatic rifle that you carry. It's a little bit heavier, it's got a higher caliber, and it needs like a chain of rounds to get fed into it. So you usually, the reason why we call it a crew serve weapon is because you usually need like a box of ammo or like a big rack of ammo to, you know, so you'd have multiple feed, and you would it's a little bit heavier. So of course a lot of soldiers and Marines, man, we're strong enough to carry all that equipment by itself, but it's just easier to have a two-man team. So that's why they call it a crew member team, because you got a gunner and assistant gunner. The assistant gunner makes sure that you got the ammo, and when you run out, he gets you more. You make sure that the ammo don't jam up while it's being fed, and he also watches your back while you're shooting. So if like any soldiers like flank you, your assistant gunner can kill them, so you can keep firing. He told me, I forgot what weapon he was on, but he told me that one time during the firefight, I guess one of the Marines got wounded, and he jumped on the crew serve weapon and started like putting rounds down range. And he said he didn't really know what happened because he didn't feel nothing, but one of his sergeants came up behind him while he was firing and said, yo, I forgot his last name because we use last names. He's like, hey, Corporal, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? You got a bullet wound in your freaking, that went through your gut, out your back, like on the side, like near his kidneys or whatever. I don't know. On the side, on your side. And he's like, really? And he looks down and he saw some blood. He's like, oh, well, I'll be all right. We'll dress it up later after this firefight's over. And the sergeant's like, what the fuck? He said the sergeant got so mad at him. He's like, stop firing. Get over there. I'm going to get somebody else there to take care of this. And he's like, no, but he eventually had to follow orders, and that was the time he got wounded. He's like, the fucking firefight was so intense that he didn't even realize he was shot. And so Rich also told me that part of the reason why they was getting at least 1 or 2 casualties a week and getting like those guys replaced, like he said, like almost every week, right? He said at least 1 or 2 guys at a minimum on his team was a new guy that they dropped into his unit, because at least it was barely. He said it was barely a time when we go like 2 weeks without somebody getting hurt. He said not a lot of KIAs, but when he started talking about killed in actions, then he would like not really talk about it. But he was like, no, Mike, you got to listen to this. He was like very willing to tell me about how these guys got injured, and he said a lot of times is, so the newer guys, the privates and stuff, since they're less experienced, they need that experience. So they usually like, once they know they got enough training, you go out on point, or you're close to the point, or you're out in front. And these guys are the first ones to encounter the booby traps. And he said the main source of the casualties wasn't the firefights, it was the booby traps when they're fucking doing their reconnaissance through the delta, through the blades of grass and shit. Now, Rich, he had never, the whole time he was in Vietnam, he never got injured from a booby trap. I think maybe he said he did take a little shrapnel from a booby trap that exploded and either killed or wounded one of the Marines that was in front of him, but that was like the closest he ever came to a booby trap. And he told me that these new guys, whenever they got to his unit, he would drill it into them. Look for this sign, be careful when you're on point, keep your eyes open and look for these markers. And he said you could always tell when there's a booby trap there. That's why he never got hit by a booby trap, because he had learned how to look and be aware of his surroundings enough to the point where he never got hit by a booby trap the whole year he was in Vietnam. But he said that was their main source of casualty, because he said just people, they would be hard-headed or just not stupid, or they're just not, I guess, like, by that time, in the point in the war in the late 60s, early 70s, they was getting everybody and their grandmother to go fight. So it's like a lot of these guys just don't have enough common sense, and they wouldn't pay attention to them. They're like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna keep going. And then they walk in a bush that's not supposed to be there, and they get blown up. So, that's what he told me. Now, Rich, like, before I even knew that he was a Marine, like, I had known him for a couple of years, and we used to talk and stuff about politics and other stuff. No, leave it alone. My dog's trying to get off the leash. Leave it alone. Stop. Sit down. So, once I found out he was a Marine, and once I found out he served in Vietnam, I was like, what happened? You know what I'm saying? And it sunk in to me once he started telling me stories, because Rich was taller than me. He's like 6'2", 6'3", something like that. Still well in shape. He's in his 60s and stuff, but you could tell, like, he was a white man, but you could tell, like, his skin was like, not burnt, but you know what I'm saying, but like, you could tell, like, his skin had been, like, he had been exposed to, like, something that, kind of made his skin a little bubbly. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody who has a bad case of acne, but it don't go away for the rest of their life. That's what he could, like, his face and his head and all that, even though he still had a full head of hair, and some facial hair. You could still see that, man. This guy was, like, probably working at a chemical plant or something like that. He told me, go sit down. He told me one day, he's like, hey, Mike, I finally decided to go back to the VA. I got a case because the VA is changing, and, they're taking care of the brothers, like the vets like us who got exposed to Agent Orange. I was like, you got exposed to Agent Orange? He's like, yeah. He's like, that stuff is bad as fuck. And he's like, I'm going to tell you why that stuff is so bad. So his story was, one time his reconnaissance unit, like a 30-man team or whatever, it was friendly fire. The Air Force was coming in. Now, during Vietnam, what the U.S. military would use the Agent Orange for is it was only supposed to be for one purpose. to destroy the vegetation in the jungle and the combat zones so that you could have a clear field of fire. And also twofold, so that the enemy couldn't use that vegetation to produce more crops, or so they could produce more camouflage or more cover. You know, so just that's why they developed Agent Orange, just destroy the vegetation and make it look like everything's already dead. So it's like it's already, you know what I'm saying? So he said it was basically unintentional friendly fire. That Agent Orange drop from the Air Force or whatever, that particular time, for some reason they didn't know that there was his Marine Corps unit, there was miscommunication or whatever, or lack of knowledge, lack of communication. They didn't know they was right next to the drop zone. It wasn't dropped right on him, but he said it was dropped right next to him. And he said the only thing that saved their life is as soon as that Agent Orange got dropped and started dispersing, it came into contact with them. They were right next to the water since they were in the Delta. He said they took off all of their clothes, all of their gear, jumped in the water. And he said that's the only thing that saved his life. But he was only exposed to Agent Orange like maybe for like a minute or so. And that affected him the rest of his life. Cancer multiple times, you know, that skin disorder that I told you about where it's like, it looks like acne that's hard to clear up. That's how bad Agent Orange was. He was only exposed to it for like 1 minute. He was able to jump in the Delta, in the seawater, and wash it off. But he said there was a couple guys in his unit that got really sick later, and I think he even told me that maybe one or two of them died later on from like cancer and stuff. So that was Rich's story. So now that y'all know a couple of those stories, I'm gonna tell you the story about well, first I'd like to tell you the story about how the Marine Corps was born. So Samuel Nicholas was commissioned. He was chosen and commissioned to be the first commandant of the Marine Corps back, but they gave him a commission as a captain, which is interesting because when you look at I have to do more detailed research, but when you look at it, you know, there was 2 battalions of Marines, that the 1st and 2nd battalion, that were initially conscripted, and they carried a colonel, lieutenant colonels, majors, and all that, and other officers. And as everybody knows, a captain, well, actually, yeah, so technically if he was a naval rank captain, then he would have been the same rank as a colonel. So Samuel Nichols had a buddy, because they were both Freemasons, you know, in the Masonic Temple in Philadelphia, that owned Toon Tavern, Robert Mullen. So Robert Mullen said, yo, he went to Robert Mullen and he's like, hey, look, the Navy wants me to start rounding up all these guys because I need to make 2 battalions of Marines with the quickness. So Robert Mullen says, over a beer, they're like, all right, Captain Nicholas, since we're buddies and there's already Masonic meetings here, we can get people here quicker to recruit them. So let's use my bar to be the first recruiting station for the United States Marine Corps. And that's the birthplace of Marine Corps Toon Tavern. The original Toon Tavern was demolished, but they are building another one right now. I haven't looked too much into details, but I think by next year or so, they're going to be opening it up. And they've saved a lot of historical, I think, artifacts or whatever from Toon Tavern. And this happened in November 10th, 1775. And the Marines' first combat missions didn't happen until January of 76, which was like it was a raid in the Bahamas, I think, and in January 1776. And they actually they were able to, the Marines in their first military operation were able to capture enemy stores in the Bahamas without firing a shot, and no casualties, nobody got killed or hurt or nothing like that. And then it was their first assault on a ship, I think was later that year, a few months later during the summertime. So my Marine Corps stories. So let's see here. I didn't serve in combat, but I'm gonna tell you this story. So I was a radar operator with artillery, right? I was a corporal, United States Marine Corps. We did 2 deployments overseas. One to Norway for cold weather training. And I found out later. Well, I'll tell you that story later. But we also did a 6-month deployment to Okinawa, Japan, for military training and joint military exercises. 30 days out of those 6 months, I think it was like, because we went in June, from June to December, so I think it was around like November. We had to do 30 days in Hokkaido, Japan. There's 3 main islands of Japan. You got Okinawa, you got the main island of Japan that has Tokyo in it, and then the 3rd island is north of that is Hokkaido, Japan. Now Hokkaido, Japan is like basically a big dairy farm. There are more cows in the island of Hokkaido than there are human beings. It's just like that's the main thing. That they also have breweries there, like famous breweries there and stuff like that. But so my job as a radio operator, I was a communications enlisted officer, non-commissioned officer. My job was to wait for the battalion command to send the fire missions, fire orders to us, and then I would, whatever the fire mission was for my officers, I would, communicate back and forth to the gun line, and the gun lines would, get my information. They would locate their targets, and then they would fire the guns. Artillery, we had 155 millimeter howitzer artillery guns, and each round of the howitzer was about 75 pounds, about this big. It's just basically like a big bullet the size of your body. Artillery, thing about artillery that people don't know is that even if you don't get killed by it, if you're in close proximity to a artillery shell that explodes on impact, even if you don't get hit by any shrapnel, if you're within like 50 to 150 meters of it, you could, or you most likely will, be killed by the shockwave of it, because it's such a powerful pack of gunpowder and explosives that the actual shockwave will actually destroy or beat up or put so much trauma to your internal organs, including your brain, that you'll just like either die instantly or you'll die quickly thereafter. So that's why in the military, in boot camp, and in combat training, they teach you how to dig fire holes and fighting holes really, really quick, because if you start taking incoming fire from artillery, the only way you can survive is getting underneath ground, because when a shell explodes, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this. Like, pretend the middle of my hand is the ground, and my fingers are where the shrapnel and the shockwave go. So the only thing that's going to save you is getting below that shockwave, and you got to be below the ground, and that'll save your life. So that's why we, you don't always want, like, people get claustrophobic. They don't want to be stuck in a freaking fighting hole. Well, guess what? You ain't got a choice, because if you get above ground, you're definitely going to get rocked. So I remember one time our lieutenant, who was running the FDC, fire direction control, and that was my job as a radar operator, to be the communicator in the fire direction control, and handle, maintain, and operate the radio equipment. We got a mission from my lieutenant. He gave me the grid coordinates. I relayed that to the gun line, and then they fired one round, right? And then what we do after that is we got a forward observer team, which is usually a team of about 5 to 10 Marines. Similar to recon, they're out in a bush, and they got to stay quiet, and they can't be located, because they got to have a line of sight from their position to where the rounds impact, so they can give us coordinates to adjust the fire, just in case the first round did not hit on target. And then once we know we've hit the target, then they can say fire for effect, which means fire all your remaining rounds on that same target. But you always got to fire at least one round to see where you're at. So after we fire that round, the forward observer team calls me back, and they're like, y'all fired off the grid. You're off the grid. You missed the whole grid. Like, you didn't even hit the target, you missed the whole grid. And the lieutenant was like, he's got mad. He's like, what? So he grabs the mic from me, keys up the mic, and he's like, how do you know I messed up the grid? How do you know I gave you the wrong coordinates? And the Ford Observer team says, because there was a cow there and now it's not there anymore. So my unit, even though we didn't serve in combat, we do have one confirmed kill. A Hokkaido Japanese cow. Tasty beef. So that's one of my Marine Corps stories. I'm doing this post today in remembrance of the first United States service member from Connecticut who was killed in the Iraq War in 2003. An was a good friend of mine, and I miss him. You know, I feel privileged that I was able to contact his family and tell him, give him my condolences, and tell him that I'm really sorry for their loss. But An's a hero, man. An is he's the reason why my daughter sleeps safe at night. He sacrificed his life for us, and I just hope that any of y'all who don't even think about you're not interested in going to boot camp and joining the military, that's fine. But at least tomorrow on Veterans Day, show a little bit of respect and appreciation for the real reason why we enjoy the freedoms. The real reason why you can go out in the street and protest and throw a fit and say you don't like this and that. The real reason why you have that ability is because of my friends like Corporal An. So, until the next time, I love y'all. Stay up. And to all those who do decide to serve in the military, I'm gonna give you the same advice I gave my family members when they first joined up before they deployed. I say, when you're over there, when you're overseas, or when you're in the military serving, keep your head down. But when you're back over here on leave, keep your head up. Walk with a sense of pride. Love you guys, and Semper Fi.